Creed 2. We just got back from it in our double feature. Gentlemen, are you still awake?
Night of the sequels.
I am awake.
Okay. So this we did a double feature. We saw Wreck-It Ralph, and now we saw Creed 2. And much in the same way, we've got some sequels here. And I think, personally, that you'll have a better time in Creed 2. What do you think?
Way better time. I like this movie.
Yeah.
Way better than the Wreck-It Ralph.
It was great. Creed 2 is fantastic. If you're a boxing fan, if you're a fan of the Rocky series, if you liked the last Creed movie, you're going to be pleasantly surprised, or you're going to be happy about it. Now, it's pretty, it is formulaic.
Oh, there's a very clear Rocky formula that has existed forever.
Yeah.
Right.
But what is it now? Like we're at 7,
8.
8
Oh,
now?
this is the 8th one?
Yep.
You're going to kind of run in circles.
But they would go back to the original one, right? Like, this is more of the feel of Rocky 3, Rocky 4,
Little
which
Rocky
are ones I
II,
liked a lot.
yes.
Yeah. Just because it's formulaic doesn't mean that it's bad. Sometimes formulas don't break something or don't fix something that's broken.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's almost kind of how I would have wished Little Wreck-It Ralph would have been, just because the first one was so good and we were so disappointed by the second one. We see meandering and really weak supporting characters. This one leaned in to its characters in the first Creed. So his girlfriend, that relationship continues and gets serious, and we're trying to stay away from spoilers, but he has to
It's a revenge movie kind
well, I guess there's certain. I mean, you've seen stuff in the trailer,
Yeah.
so Creed has to also deal with a family, right? And we've seen some of this stuff in the Rocky films, right? Mm-hmm. And it does it here, so there can be a little bit of repetition, and sometimes the film was slow. I was a little worried there. It was a little slow, but I think that it was using its time to set up its characters.
I didn't have a problem with the pacing. It was 2 hours and 8 minutes, just over 2 hours, and it wasn't fast, but there was not a part where I was bored. Like, you
Right.
recognize that there's not a lot of action happening because there's a lot of fights in this film, but they have to develop the characters because, I mean, when they're wildly throwing punches at each other and
Well,
not
how many
blocking,
fights are in the film?
3 or 4?
Yeah, about 3. Maybe you can count 4, but it's pretty much 3.
Yeah.
But it's super satisfying, each one. I'll tell you, I think that the fights were filmed better in this one than the original. I think that the songs, it just evoked more feelings of the original Rocky series. than
You
the
tell
original.
me your problem with the film, though.
Hearts on Fire.
Hearts on Fire was
What?
not in the
Need
film.
Hearts on Fire.
The greatest.
What is Hearts on Fire? What?
You
I
need
don't
to
remember.
listen to that song. It is amazing.
It's from Rocky 4. He's in a shack in Siberia, and he runs up this mountain, and he's doing like sit-ups in front of a fire, and he's lifting up a.
Come on.
God, dude, that
I
totally
can't.
would not fit in this movie, Joe.
It would've been amazing.
They
it
were
would've.
doing rap songs and freaking badass produced beats that got me
Yeah,
hyped
but
up.
You still need to throw it back.
There
a
was
little
some of the
bit.
original Rocky
Yeah.
montage songs in there, though.
That would have
Just not
been
the best one.
completely out of place, guys. Hearts on Fire. But that's another thing. The montages. We were a little disappointed in the original Creed, and we'll give you our verdict of the original Creed as well, of the lack of impactful montages. You guys think montages were done better here?
Yeah, it did,
Oh, yeah, by
definitely.
far. Because I don't know what that 18-wheeler in the little...
Oh, the
or
ATV,
18
the ATV
ATVs and
circles
the
that he
little
does.
biker
Yeah.
game
Yeah, the
in
little
a circle. I was
Philadelphia.
like, what is this?
And you can't hear anything. Nah, that didn't work. This one worked.
Yeah.
It looks like he was putting in the time. He was the strength training. They go out in the middle of a desert and they do the old school stuff, just like they had to do when Rocky has to take on somebody that is much bigger than him. And Rocky, does that here as well. That
Every movie, it's like, oh, he's
Oh.
bigger and dangerous. He's
Yeah.
bigger and dangerous.
And we get several great sort of throwbacks to the other films visually as well. You could tell parallels. The beach running scene in particular has a little bit of a parallel here, obviously different because Rocky can't run like that anymore. But yeah, so what about some of the subplots in the film? Were you entertained by them? Did you think
Oh,
they all
one,
worked?
I was actually surprised they actually got Bridget back in here.
Oh, Brigitte Nielsen's back, yeah.
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 So basically, Drago, after he lost his fight with Rocky, his whole country disowned him. He moved to Ukraine. His wife left him. He was like a stray dog, and it's
Yeah,
a
and
hard upbringing for his son.
for sure, and I like that as well, because what that does
Yeah.
is that actually gives Drago's son's character a little bit more of a story that you can sort of sympathize with or get behind. Now, Drago was the ultimate bad guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
literally the prototype, clean, perfect in every way, and that's good. But he barely said anything. He said like 2 lines. I must break.
And I was upset that he didn't say that. His son didn't say that.
They
right?
did.
Yeah.
They did
He-
variations.
kind of.
Sort of,
They
yeah.
let Dolph Lundgren say those lines. How dare anybody else say them? You know what I mean? But he never said that directly
Yeah,
like he used
I
to.
kind of wanted that. Not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
I mean, they do say it, and you'll see the variations yourself.
Yeah.
We don't want to spoil it, but yeah. So, but what I was saying is, there's zero sympathy. You just want to beat this guy, right? And then the whole pageantry of the USSR versus the US, and the red and the yellow versus the red, white, and blue. This film lacked a little bit of that in the when they first have a fight, because they encounter each other relatively quick, which I was happy with. He's not even wearing red trunks. And
It's
and
not
some
the
of
Cold
stuff.
War anymore.
I
Like-
know.
like-
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that what are they going to do in order to keep this engaging or this story interesting? Obviously, that film had the clashing of worlds, the Cold War.
The original, like, one of the greatest ways to start a fight is you go in the playground and go, well, my dad can beat up your dad. And he had that. My dad not only beat up your dad, but he killed him.
There you go.
So, I mean, we had the motivation right there.
So that's why this one works a little bit better, and it's almost a little bit of a sympathetic character. There are scenes in this film where I think it's hinting a little bit at Drago's internal conflict, his motivation for what he does, and I found that interesting. They didn't press it. They could have gone a little bit more with it for that to come through, but I think they stayed away with it because they didn't want to disparage the whole Drago is, the ultimate thing to overcome, and they didn't want to make Drago a fully sympathetic character. But I really appreciated that subplot with Drago
yeah,
and
because I didn't know
his
who
son.
to go for. I was like, I don't know. He does.
What? Joe, seriously?
I'm just saying.
Wow.
I feel bad for him.
Yeah, well, it's just I wish he was. I have a small nitpick I'd like to say. I wish Drago's character was clean cut. He goes with the facial hair, and it's just to me it doesn't look like his son. If he kept his body like super clean cut, just like Drago was in the original film, then I think I would have seen that resemblance a little bit more. But small nitpicks here, because the film overall was great, fantastic.
It was.
What about there is another subplot. I'm worried about talking about it until spoilers.
I mean, it's not important. Like, all of the subplots in this film, they kind of just they don't spend a lot of time with. Like, they stick to the game plan, which is we've got the Rocky formula, let's keep it concise, and we're not going to stray too far from it. And they didn't. So they explored a lot of little things, like the relationships are really, really important in this film, like from family and old enemies and countries, and I mean, they didn't get too into it, which I think I would have had a problem with.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time developing the characters, and yes, we've seen it before with some of the previous Rocky films, but these characters are likable enough to where you find their scenes interesting. We do get a scene involving, Rocky Balboa and Drago meeting in person and having a conversation, which I felt was cool. I mean, obviously, they're not going to have a fight. I want them to have a fight. But
I don't know about you, but I'm looking for that. That's going to be next. Rocky, 9, 10? It's going to be the original fight.
what?
It'd be
The two old guys
amazing,
go back in
yes.
the ring? Joe, that just would not work. They would have
I'd watch it.
I
Yes,
would watch
I
it
would
too.
watch it too.
My point exactly.
Yeah, so basically, guys, Creed 2 was satisfying. The pageantry. What I really liked about it, and you get your money's worth in terms of punching and fighting, okay? Because there were moments in
blocking.
the film. Not blocking.
I think there was actually a
There
little
was
bit
more
counters.
blocking.
I will say that.
Than in any other Rocky film, but that says so little.
Right, because Rocky is literally. But this one, there were combos, there were counters, but a lot of offense, and that's honestly what's exciting.
yeah.
It's more fun to watch.
And frankly, boxing has, I don't know, sort of lost. A lot of people have lost interest in boxing. They showed off HBO Sports, HBO Boxing, which is no longer going to be a thing. I think HBO is leaving the boxing ring, so that's a little sad to see. But I love the fact that modern times you've got the entrances, and they do some interesting entrances that we could talk about in the spoilers section. Obviously, the champ gets the coolest entrances. But, those sort of lights and stuff, it really lends well to make you think you're watching a real boxing match. I think they did a great job of keeping it realistic in that sense, the stuff around it. So let's go ahead and make this one a quick one because it's relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
We'll give some final verdicts. Alex?
You go first.
All right. Do you want to do our Creed?
Oh, for sure. Let's do the original Creed. Go ahead.
I think for me, Creed was it's all of the Rocky movies are flawed. There were some problems with Creed where I think it lacked the punch that some of the other movies did. There was there was no montages, which is not necessarily a problem. There was a lot of other stuff happening that kind of pulled it away. So I don't think I like Creed. I think it's maybe like a 7, but it doesn't. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving it any higher than that. This film, I think, is better than the previous one. So I think Creed 2 is superior to Creed 1.
For sure.
I think that this movie, for me, is an 8 out of 10. Especially if you're in the mood to see a Rocky film, this is definitely one. I mean, am I going to watch this over Rocky 4? Probably not. But right after Rocky 4, I'll put this one on.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Joe.
I was actually in the same boat. 7 for me. For the original, I didn't really like the subplot. Y'all guys did the whole cancer thing with Rocky. He was dealing with that.
That was in the original Creed.
Yeah.
The fights here are way better, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree.
And I like the story and the relationship building with everything else. So I'm going to give this an 8.
7 to 8 and 7 to 8. And honestly, we have complete agreement on this one. I think that, but to be perfectly honest, when I walked out of that theater in Creed, I probably would have given that thing an 8 because I was hyped. I was ready for a boxing film. I like boxing films. It sucks that, boxing has sort of fallen out of favor and it's the UFC stuff. But upon further reflection, and we rewatched the film before we watched Creed 2, and I just, after watching Creed 2, it did so many things better. It fixed some issues from the first film. For example, one of the complaints we've always had from the first film is, where's Rocky's son? Rocky's kind of an asshole. He doesn't really talk to his son, and he makes this Creed guy his surrogate son, and he doesn't bother calling. Well, they kind of address that in this film.
Yeah.
And so they really fixed a lot of and that's not just that, but also with the boxing, also with the training montages, also with the feeling and the music. I mean, part of the Rocky series is the music. And while they may not have got this Hearts on Fire thing in there,
it could have been perfect. It could have been perfect.
Right?
Would you guys, if Hearts on Fire was in there, would y'all have gone from an 8 to a 9?
Instant classic, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But this is the
With the
rapping.
training
Yo,
montage.
y'all don't like rap anymore? What the hell?
Of course I do. But I mean,
yeah.
you can
The classics.
You could put it in at another time.
Yeah, all right.
More montages, so more montage songs.
All right, so in this one, I think the rap music fit a lot better, especially when it's good. And it actually ties into the story, one of his entrance songs, which I thought was perfect. So, the original Creed is a 7 out of 10 upon rewatching, and this one is better, 8 out of 10. I think, could they have done any better with it? I mean, why don't we feel like a 9?
Well, because it's safe. Like, this movie was really safe. Like, they followed. I mean, without getting the spoilers, we know which Rocky film this has the formula from, and it followed it pretty closely. So when you play safe, you take
which one? 3?
Well, yeah. I mean,
parts of 3, parts of 2.
3 and 4, I think, is mainly where I was
4,
getting the formula from. And because they played so safe and they had this formula, it's kind of hard to be exceptional when you're trying to fit it into the box, right?
Right.
So I think that, I mean, they did a great job, like with the parameters they set for themselves, but it's kind of hard to rise above that.
Yeah, great points. Joe, same thing?
Yeah.
Just a little too formulaic. You wanted to see something a little outside the box to grab that extra point, plus the soundtrack.
Yeah,
plus the soundtrack.
You have to have the soundtrack, but like it's the Rocky formula. What else are you gonna do? You can only go so much bigger, so much more dangerous. What is he gonna do? Fight a big boulder or something? You can't get much bigger than that fucking guy.
He fights 3 dudes at the same time. He's not gonna block anyway.
I was like, you can't get.
Hey, he could have done a wrestling match. Rocky did it.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway,
Hulkamania.
Little outside the box thinking. There could have been robots in his house, maybe. Or
I did like those.
But they already did it in Rocky.
Right.
Yeah.
But all right, guys. Do you think that we will get a Creed 3? Because this one, like you guys said, I don't know why I said 2. It is like 3 and 4,
I was
obviously.
honestly already thinking about that, and yes.
Do you think there'll be more?
You
Clubber Lang, son?
Yes.
We don't need Clubber
Yes. What? Why not?
And because it's just gonna be following that
He's
formula.
a bigger guy. He's a monster.
Even bigger.
He's dangerous.
Yes.
Did you see how big Drago is?
Yeah.
This guy's gonna be
That
bigger
guy's
and
huge.
hungry.
And then he's gonna try to take his woman. Hey, woman.
He's gonna
You
fight
want real, man?
He's gonna fight the
Exactly.
mountain
We
from
need
Game
him.
of Thrones.
You would watch it?
Yeah.
Creed 3. Clubber Lang's son versus
Like
Apollo.
honestly, I would watch any Rocky movie because they have like the fights. I'm there for the fights, except for what the other one was. The Johnny one.
Yeah, the
That
one
one
with
was
his
Balboa?
understudy or something.
Or was that
No,
5?
I
No,
like
it was
Balboa.
before
It was
that.
Rocky 5.
5,
I think
yeah.
it was just Rocky 5. But anyways, so do you think they'll make another?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this one kind of caps it off and makes it perfect. The only thing I was thinking that they could do is potentially have Rocky's character pass away, just like how
They did with
Mickey
Mickey
passed
and,
away,
yeah.
and then that would be the final film. So if they ever do a Creed 3, I would worry that
Clubber Lang.
that's the last fucking film. Yeah, like Clubber
They
Lang.
just no. It's
Anyway,
not his son.
we're
It's just
getting-
Mr. T.
We're
comes
getting
back.
off track here. We got to do a quick spoiler section. There's
Okay.
really not much to spoil because
It's
it's
a Rocky film. You
it's
know
a
exactly
Rocky
what
film. You know
happens.
what happens. So my final rating was a 7 and an 8. Pretty much 7 and 8s across the board. Original Creed 7. This one 8 out of 10. Go and see it if you have your choice this Thanksgiving weekend of Wreck-It Ralph sequel or this one. And your dad's with you, this one's go with your dad to this one. He'll love it, and
Yeah.
it's because there is a lot of father-son stuff in it as well. So, and
If your dad isn't with you, don't go see a movie because Wreck-It Ralph is really bad.
yeah, oh, you're just making sure people don't go see
Don't
that.
see that movie.
I'm sure mass audiences will enjoy that one.
Oh, they're
It
gonna
just
love it.
Has none of the magic of the original. Maybe like 1 or 2 jokes, and it's watchable, but nothing. Anyways, all right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Stick around for the spoiler section, and we will see you on the next Angry Joe Show. Bye, guys. Okay, welcome to the spoiler section for Creed 2. Guess what? Apollo Creed wins. Or Creed wins.
Oh well, he
Yeah.
loses.
No, Johnson.
So
What's
it's
his last
basically
name?
following Clubber Lang's story.
Yeah, Rocky.
First
This is
Fights
Rocky
him
3.
too soon. He's not ready. He loses, but he gets disqualified on this one.
Correct. So when I was concerned, I was like, damn, man, they're already fighting. He's going to
Yeah,
fucking
I think
lose.
it's
You
too
know
soon.
he's going to fucking lose. So even though you know it's going to happen, it does a small twist here, the disqualification. So Drago is beating the fuck out of Creed. He has no chance.
Yeah.
And what happens is he goes down and he's on his knee, and Drago just takes that opportunity. I think it uppercuts him.
Yep.
and just knocks him completely out. Puts him in the hospital, 3 broken ribs,
ruptured kidney,
all sorts of
there
contusions,
bloody pee. It was some.
I was wondering if they were going to show the after effects of fighters, because that stuff happens when you get fucked up.
Yeah.
Even if you win, that stuff happens.
And they kind of stayed away from that a little bit in some of the Rocky films, made it more glamorous. But then as the Rocky films went on, they showed some of the degradation. But this one, they're showing you the immediate after effects of a big fight like that. He ends up in the hospital. Rocky, refused to train him. Rocky didn't want to train him. He says, I can't. I would have liked a little bit more with that on why he can't. Rocky yelling at him like, it was my call. I didn't throw in the towel, and maybe a little bit more guilt. He does talk about that.
Yeah, they touched on it.
But it needed to be a little bit more sort of intense. But maybe it stayed true to Rocky's character that he doesn't like lose his cool like that anymore.
Yeah, I think it's still pretty impactful because he's like, well, don't worry, you don't have to throw the towel this time. He's like, it's something I got to live with. And he kind of walks in. He's going to say something. He's like, no, forget it. And walks inside. It was pretty good.
It was good. But so he watches the fight from his Adrian's, his restaurant that he's retired to. And, gets his ass kicked. Oh, we got to talk about the scene with Drago. So how'd you like that? Drago going to his restaurant.
I wanted more from that scene.
Yeah, me too.
I know that Rocky isn't a great communicator because he wasn't all that smart before he started boxing, and then he got punched in the head for a career.
Both of these guys are not talkers, and they're not smart, so the scene kind of goes how you think it's going to go, but we wanted more.
I definitely wanted more. Either if it was just there's common ground between them, and they could either explore that, there's still some mutual respect between them, and they didn't touch on that at all. I mean, when they ended the fight, like, his arms around him, in Rocky IV, right? He puts his arms around him, he raises his hand up, like, he acknowledges that this guy's...
speech. If I can change,
you can change, yeah. And so it's like...
oh, shit, yeah.
There's this weird animosity that I didn't feel was appropriate. I mean, I know why Drago hates him, because his life was ruined after the fact, but Rocky doesn't have that, and he was more standoffish than the other guy.
Yeah. Well, that sort of explains it, because he does lose his wife, he loses his country, everybody pretty much betrays him and says he was a piece of meat, essentially, for that machine and the propaganda machine of the communist regime in that film. And you see it in his face, and he's not really made a bad guy. He doesn't really taunt too much about Apollo. He sees a picture of Apollo on the wall. He's like, nice picture. So not anything to where they can just get into a brawl in his, bar or something. They didn't want to go that far with it. But, a little bit more would have been nice right there. Anyways, he's training. Oh, so I wanted to talk at the beginning. Who's the fighter that he beats at the beginning?
Wheeler. That's the one that broke his jaw in the last one.
Right. So in the first film, some people were disappointed because they're like, oh, wait a minute. There's this guy talking shit at the beginning, and then you never see him again. They don't fight, and he fights a completely different guy. Well, you get the payoff here. And he's like, give me my keys.
He gets his car back.
You don't really get the payoff because he's already like 3 years over.
Past his prime.
He's not fighting the best fighters.
But he becomes the world champion.
I think he fights somebody a lot worse than Wheeler in his prime. It's Drago in his prime.
Yeah,
So I think that's saying
that's the main one.
Training montages goes down to Mexico or the southern border or out in the desert somewhere. Because there's some hard people looking like they were in prison. They're still in prison, but they're free out in the middle of the desert. There's apparently one building. It's a gym and a boxing ring and nothing else.
Tires and hammers and more tires.
And one of the biggest tattooed dudes I've ever seen. And they put a tire down, and he puts his foot in, and Apollo Creed has to put his foot in. I thought that was so cool, where it's like, you do not get away. You're going to punch each other. You're going to take hits. And you're going to have to, move around if you don't want to get hit. And so that was really cool, those particular scenes. What do you think about Apollo having a baby?
I think it was a nice little piece of motivation. It kind of fit some of the Rocky formula, right? Because Rocky has a kid in 2 or 3.
I think it was 2.
And it provides some like pre-fight motivation, right? So she doesn't want him to fight in one of them, and it's like it fits that whole thing.
Yeah, because what else is he gonna fight for? He already got the belt, but now he's fighting for his family.
Yep.
Like this whole movie is basically on relationship building and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the subplot with her,
And
the baby being deaf.
Yeah, it kind of went nowhere, and it kind of felt like maybe they had developed it and cut more scenes for it, but it kind of felt even odd to mention it because they did so little with it.
Yeah.
And I know it's important to the mother because, you know, she's got hearing problems.
Degenerative condition
Yeah.
that she's going to lose her hearing. When they showed that in the second film, I'm like, okay, good. They're paying attention to their own setups, and I thought that it was going to continue in that way, and she was eventually going to lose her hearing, and maybe her career and Apollo would have to deal with that. But no, it doesn't go that direction. It's more, hey guys, do you remember that she has this condition? So they remind you that it passed on to the baby, and by the end of the film, they didn't really do much with it. I think it was more about Rocky giving Apollo a piece of advice, you know, what happens if she is deaf, because Apollo doesn't want her to be deaf, and he's like praying that these additional tests will work out when you know it's probably not going to work out. So he says you need to be okay with it, and that was the little payoff. Apollo growing as a person, learning to accept the facts of life. Sometimes things don't go your way, I guess.
Yeah,
That
I
would
mean,
be the point.
like I said, it feels like they cut something else, like an additional scene out. But at the end, it's resolved. She's got the cochlear implant in, and she seems to be fine.
So the fight, it culminates in a badass fight, and what I was talking about before is that his intro song is actually sung by his wife, and I thought that was cool because they set that up in the previous film. She has a singing career. They never really used it, but here it's like, hey, what a perfect opportunity for you to come into a song, and it's his wife, and I thought that was awesome because they're coming in as a family, they're coming in as a team, and it was sweet. And then, of course, he wins. Drago's side of the ropes, his mother, they have a dinner scene. They go to Russia. Russia tries to accept them back because he's a winner now. He's winning a lot.
Yeah.
And he's back in the limelight. And you could see that the subplot there is that they only like you when you win. And they don't really appreciate you or like you for the person. And I was hoping that would have a little bit more payoff. And maybe this film treats you more like an adult, and it doesn't spell everything out for you, because the ending scene, even though Drago lost, they're still running together. They're still working out as if they're going to continue to fight with his dad as his trainer, and he looks over at his dad.
And he threw the towel this time.
Yeah.
He threw the towel. He saved his son, showing that, you know, his son is more important to him than winning, as opposed. But see, a lot of this stuff is not spelled out for audiences, and I appreciated that fact. It treated you a little bit more like an adult, but I hope that everybody else was really getting that.
Oh, I think they were. I mean, it wasn't. You know, they're not hitting you in the head with a hammer like with it, but I mean,
you don't have to hit them in the head and the hammer, but you could have put a little bit more in.
Yeah.
And just like you said, there was not really that kind of mutual respect. You would think that Drago, I thought that something was about to happen between Drago and Rocky on the sides of because Drago was walking over there, but he was just going to throw in the towel. And they didn't look at each other. They didn't motion to each other. And so I just wish there was a little bit more there. But no, he turns out, defends his title, defeats Drago. Drago's mother, Bridget Nelson, leaves before the match is even done. She's like, he's going to lose.
He starts to lose, and then she takes off.
And he sees that his corner is empty, but yet he gets up anyway, and it's Creed just pummeling him into submission until his father throws in the towel. So,
what do you think of the cheating thing that happened in the final fight, where Drago kind of grabs his arm and then breaks his ribs? So
yeah.
I didn't appreciate that. I didn't even like it as much because felt kind of unnecessary. Drago's character isn't a bad guy. He's poor. He's working his way up, but he's not evil in any way. Like, he's got motivations where he wants to beat this guy up, but he doesn't want to like kill him. Like, he was never made out to be
very obedient because his dad was the one who was making him do it.
There you go, Joe.
Yeah, but it didn't make sense. It didn't feel like it fit, and it was kind of unnecessary. It's like, why make this guy out to be the bad guy? Because you had him cheat in this thing. It's like you break his ribs by cheating. There's no reason for it.
What they were doing there, Alex, is they were trying to create more tension for that fight. But like you said, it was probably unnecessary.
he was already pummeling him a ton in the
Because
first
it
couple
looked-
rounds. Yeah.
Right, but it was a little bit more like, is Apollo actually going to get out of this with completely broken ribs? He's actually have to finish the fight, so that's why they broke his ribs. But yeah, cheating. It seems a little out of character. It was more like Joe said. His father. His father's like, I cannot lose this. So I'm gonna tell my son, break his ribs, break him. He said, break him again, is what he says. So that leads you to believe that the first time in the first time he actually told him break him as well.
Yeah, but he didn't do it the first time by cheating. He just punched him in the ribs until they broke. I mean, he could have done that the same time this time. It kind of seemed.
But this one was intentional. Yeah. It was a little off.
Because he was losing, he just wanted the upper hand.
I guess there was more to talk about, and in the spoilers. And then finally, the film ends. Rocky actually picks up the phone and tries to call Robert, his son. I think his son sends a picture of the baby. Oh no, that wasn't his son. That was Apollo Creed's new boy. Adonis.
Mom.
Yeah, Adonis's new daughter. But what I mean is his son has a son, and so he's a granddad, and he at the end of the film he finally works up the courage to just travel there, knock on the door, they open up,
He
and
just hoped they were home.
yeah. And it's his little his little grandson opens up. It's a cute little moment, and his son shows up at the door, and there's a lot of emotion there because I like the explanation. I didn't think that they would be able to do the explanation, like why are they keeping the son out. But sometimes with family members, and I know this from experience from my uncles and aunts, the way they interact with each other, something bad happens, and then you just don't talk, and then you don't talk, and that time gets longer and longer, and as it does, you feel like you'll never be able. So what's the point? I've got my own life, they got their own life, and so when he's able to repair it, it's a nice little emotional scene, and he's like, well, he invites him in his house. Do you want to come in and have some food and stuff? And so he's at the end of the film. Finally repairs his relationship with his family, with his son Robert. Creed is champion, and Drago's defeated, and his father still loves him.
Everybody learned a lesson.
And everybody learned the lesson. And Clubber Lang's son is somewhere training, and he's hungry. He's hungry.
And he's big.
You had your time. Now it's my time. Hey, woman. So hopefully I want to see. I'll tell you what. I want to see one more. I am down for one more Creed film. Then end it at we're done.
What Rocky film are we gonna copy this time, though?
We're gonna have to do a little bit of Clubber Lang. And then a little bit of new.
How about we go all the way back to Rocky 1, though, where he's so big and he's beating up everyone. He's like, I'm going to give one of these local guys a shot, one of these no-name fighters, and I'm going to give him the shot at the champ. And this no-name fighter comes up and just knocks him out, but he still wins. We just go full Rocky 1 all over again.
And they the twist is they never mention the name, and then they show the name at the end, something Lang. I don't know. All right, guys. See you guys on the next Angry Joe show. You guys have a happy Thanksgiving with your family. We are working on Fallout and Battlefield 5, but my family showed up a little early this year, so maybe it's probably going to be a little bit late. So thank you for your patience, guys, and we'll see you on the next Angry Joe show. Bye,
Make
guys.
sure you subscribe.
Oh, yeah, subscribe, hit that bell, and grab some merch. All right? Thank you so much for supporting our show. We'll see you on the next Angry Joe show. Bye, guys.
Yes.